Wow. So welcome, Scott Ramming,
Yeah,
from
even.
Colorado. And Scott, wow, we're just seeing each other again for the first time in a long time. We
Mm,
we met, I believe, for the first time in 1991 when we
okay.
started at MIT.
hmm
And I went
That
to
was my
MIT.
first year. I think we were the same year.
Probably, I think
You
we
might
were.
be ahead
I
of me.
think we were. I think we started in the transport program at the same time
hmm
at MIT.
Yeah,
And yeah, I'm pretty sure we were on the same schedule. And we started the program together and we
lots of
were
classes.
involved in the same groups of people and
hmm
socializing and doing classwork and doing courses and doing things. Um, and I think just for fun here, I pulled up your LinkedIn profile.
Ah,
So look at
okay.
you. So for those of us watching the
That's
video,
really up to
those
date.
out there watching the video, we kind of come down here at the bottom and see here we are. You and I together were in this
hmm
MS transportation program, and but they captured you. They didn't let you go. I
Oh,
ran
yeah.
away. I ran away and
Okay.
get a job in industry, but they caught you, didn't they? Because you stayed. Now you're in Colorado, but you went to
Right.
Colorado right away. You went to Colorado. What? But you're not from
Yeah.
Colorado, is that right?
I'm from Oklahoma originally, so a neighboring state and
Okay.
maybe similar pace of life.
I guess so. The first thing on our list, unless you have any other suggestions, the first thing on our list is for you to talk about where you're working now and what you're responsible for and what the transport services are that you're responsible
Yeah. So say DTD, which is the Division of Transportation Development, which is more of a support role for kind of the planning, environmental clearance, obviously modeling to get the projects that CDOT manages, the services and assets they provide. And then IMB is the information management branch within that, which is relatively a vague title. Within that, there's a GIS section, and I go back and look at my notes. It has um, 3 units. Maybe just do that. Um, there, yeah, that's all. There's an applications and data services unit that are involved with database design and application programming. There's a data management unit of our linear referencing system for all the roadways in the state highway system, and a GIS support unit, which is for internal and partner customers. I'm in the mobility analysis section, and within that, we have a data collection unit, and those are the people who maintain the automated traffic recorders. So, since we get federal gas tax funds, one of the obligations that comes with that is providing statistics on uh, the conditions of all the miles of roadway, the amount of travel on it, travel for our state. And I wonder if it might be useful to give an overview of Colorado for your students. So here's just the Google map that I'm here in Denver. Oh, here's a place that I started that we'll talk about in a little bit. But this kind of has the seat of their 5 MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations, in Colorado. Fort Collins is the office for the North Front Range. Colorado Springs is probably the secondary metro area behind Denver, Aurora, Boulder, Lakewood. Pueblo is, I think the city is about 150,000 and the county might be 250,000. And Grand Junction, ooh, I'm in trouble. I'm maybe off by a zero for that. I think they're no, that 500,000 seems rather large. Maybe it's only 100,000.
Hmm.
And then if I click on this, and you can zoom in And you can see, for instance, in the North Front Range, there's these three major cities. Fort Collins is joined by Loveland and Greeley. I-25 kind of connects these major urban areas, and that's called, we call the Front Range, since you then get into the foothills and the mountains. The Continental Divide is out right there. I-70 is the east-west interstate. There's a diagonal I-76 that connects to I-80 going to Chicago. Grand Junction and places like Montrose, Telluride, you might know as a ski resort, are referred to as the Western Slope. Again, kind of orienting ourselves from the mountains along here, which are a big area for recreation. So for instance, you see Aspen is another ski resort. That's about the orientation.
So that represents your area. I mean, how much of that area are you responsible for?
So we're responsible for modeling the whole state.
Okay, but are you focused on transit, or are you focused on roads, or what is your focus area?
We do surface transport. I've asked about, oh, we have a cat. We may have to. He probably wants her treats. So we're fairly multimodal, but focus on surface modes. We haven't started to do air travel. And within the state, obviously, Denver Airport is a major hub. And CDOT actually has a division of aeronautics. I guess one factoid I remember is that we have 74 public use airports that range in size from sort of tiny general aviation that serve local communities to, again, Colorado Springs Airport is the second largest. There's some like Aspen, Eagle County Airport serve recreational destinations. Hayden Airport serves Steamboat Springs. And others, you might have like a lot of regional jet service. For surface mode, I mean, we were originally the Colorado Department of Highways until I think around the 70s. And USDOT in the 60s kind of began the push to have more integrated multimodal departments of transportation. In addition to the aviation that I described, we have we run or manage, we have a division of transit and rail. And it seems a little redundant, but rail can be both passenger and freight. Transit is usually passenger, but any mode. We currently run a sort of statewide or interregional bus service called Bustang. So again, some of that Western flavor. With Denver as a hub, the original 3 routes went north to Fort Collins, south to Colorado Springs, and then west, I think initially to Glenwood Springs, but then later to Grand Junction. And then more recently, we've added what we call Outrider service, which is a daily trip between some of the other metro areas. So there's a Durango Grand Junction route, Alamosa, Pueblo, Colorado Springs, Gunnison, Denver, and then Lamar to Pueblo. And Lamar is in the Arkansas River Valley.
We're really motivated to talk about geographic information systems today, because that's what the course is about.
Sure,
We're doing. And so let's start talking a little bit about that. When were you first introduced to what we would call today a geographic information system?
So we were doing some speculating as we sent the draft of these questions. What I think was sort of the first kind of true GIS that I was exposed to was near the end of getting my master's thesis together. I had used an early DOS version of, I think it was maybe ArcInfo, to create an overlay between census geography and then the transportation analysis zones that are used by the Boston Metropolitan Planning Organization. And basically that was to create a lookup table that I could then use to make drawings within database software. So I really had very limited, I mean, just enough exposure to create my table. It was, in those days, I remember it was kind of something that the urban studies folks were involved with. And it distinguishes it from, before my graduate studies, I had interned at the St. Louis MPO, which had their transportation planning package was, this is in the DOS days, was called MinUTP, and it had a component called NetView, so you could view the links of your network on the screen, but it had just an arbitrary coordinate system of X would be 1 to 32,767 for numbers that would fit into an integer, and the same for Y. And I don't think that even divided evenly into a certain number of miles or feet. So the ArcInfo was the first instance where the points were referenced to Latin law or geographic coordinates.
And what year is that?
I think 93.
1993. So you were using this at MIT?
At MIT, yeah.
Okay.
And I had to go up to the Urban Studies Library or something, or Urban Studies Computer Lab.
Okay.
To be able to access it.
Okay. So so how are you using systems GIS today in some of these planning tools, planning tasks that you're doing in Colorado?
Okay. So if it's worth, maybe I should share again. So the main tool I use is Transcad, which is by Caliper Corporation, more MIT people. This is what it looks like. I'll find a map that I was working on last night for some redundancy planning. And this is highly zoomed in. I'm not sure what will happen when I zoom out. So here's the Denver CBD, I-70 comes in around like that. Here's I-25, I-76 starts here, a town called Arvada. And this network with the green dashed links is essentially the network that we use for travel modeling and planning. So it includes not only state highways, which are at a minimum shown in these black hairlines, and then I've made some selections with the brown are unique cases in this detour analysis. And we were fortunate that we were able to get the network data and socioeconomic data from the 4 MPOs, since they've been doing modeling in some context or another much longer than CDOT has. Okay, so this network has been, is something that for the detours I had augmented. I will add a layer. Okay, just to show the state boundaries. Just to have some orientation, and maybe I should have added all the states. Since, I mean, and especially with, as people say, Colorado was rectangular or intended to be rectangular, the geography doesn't necessarily respect those state lines. Many times, especially for routes near the border, the best detour may be in an adjoining state. Um, so here you see Grand Junction, Montrose, Durango, San Luis Valley. My colleagues had to uh, um, populate, decide which links would be included and which would not. And obviously the state highways, for the most part, do need to be in there. Oh, I don't know if this might be an interesting exception. So I can zoom out just a little bit. So Colorado is kind of interesting that one of our state highways ascends to Mount Evans. We call it a 14er because it's 14,000 feet, but I think that's, I'm sure it's over 4,000 meters. The oxygen gets fairly thin. This road is usually only open from Memorial Day at the end of May until about mid-October, when there's too much snow to be removing it, and not much demand to go up in the cold anyway. So that's maybe one unique aspect of living in Colorado and working for Colorado DOT.
What kind of projects are you working on now in the department using GIS?
Okay.
And how are they affecting the future transport system for Colorado?
So I mentioned one of these studies is is for our resilience program, which is looking at trying to do some advanced detour planning. If I can find, I'll just zoom in here. So I think I'd mentioned Glenwood Springs earlier as a destination of one of the Mustang routes along I-70. So this portion, and also for orientation, okay, I see our little pod. Oh, okay. So here's the Vail, no, it's over here. The Vail ski area, this is Eagle County and becomes Garfield County for Glenwood Springs. This area with the intense green is called Glenwood Canyon, and it was kind of an environmentally sensitive kind of engineering challenge that I think they've done some good treatment, and that's probably something that the students could also Google. And maybe I'm too close to the tunnel. There are areas. So here you can see that they used a terraced approach, lots of bridges and viaducts to permit the streams from going. Oh, and you see it looks like where a lot of the rocks come from up here, and which may necessitate it being closed for a little while for the maintenance crews to then go out and remove the boulders, repair any damage, maybe to the guardrail, to the roadway surface. And one of the difficulties, let's see, this year there was also a fire fairly close around here. And so they, in fact, had to create such detours. And unfortunately, Google was somewhat naively sending people on one of these tiny fine white lines that I'm not sure if you can even do. Okay, that one you can until about here. So here would be, this is a photosphere, but as you can see, it's rather precarious.
Good choice.
A four-wheel drive vehicle, preferably maybe with some experience, not a place you want to have a traffic jam. And so we're hoping that by preparing these detours in advance, We can be more responsive, and it basically, I've written a script that uses a link elimination if there are any students who are studying like the K shortest paths, K different paths algorithm. So we go through the state highway links and close them one by one and find, okay, what would the new detour be on the state highway system or the system of the neighboring states. And actually these, so these brown highlighted links, that'll be a little faster. Here's a good example. So this is the historic road. This is US 6. It's near a town called Wiggins that has been replaced by Interstate 76 as a bypass. And since the algorithm depends on shortest paths for segments, this brown I'm using to indicate that the algorithm isn't working as we would hope, because the shortest path, even with going out of your way to get on the ramps, it's actually shorter to take I-76 than US 6 itself. So maybe that's one interesting GIS observation. Another project that I'm working on is called Front Range Rail. So we're looking at the first of the time. So while there is passenger rail within the Denver metro area, and so this Front Range Rail system would connect with that. We're evaluating some alternatives either from downtown or the airport. Some go through Boulder, which is a fairly populous or well-known. The University of Colorado, the flagship campus is located there. And I believe that's also where our current governor lives. And that line would go probably from Fort Collins to Pueblo. There's aspirations Cheyenne would be interested in at some point. Would be interested in a connection. New Mexico has their rail runner system. Okay, I think it goes from Belen to Santa Fe. And then there's some Amtrak routes. So currently the Southwest Chief, so it comes in, not sure what it's in Kansas, but it comes through Lamar, La Junta, turns down through Trinidad, goes through Raton Pass, works its way to sort of kind of near Santa Fe and Albuquerque, and then out to Los Angeles. So there's talk about how should these different systems be integrated, and how might each support and feed each other within always limited budgets, of course.
Yeah. So how will you do that?
So Transcad does transit analysis using what they call a route system, which you'll see is essentially a polyline entity, but it references multiple polylines of the link segments of the link layer that underlies it. So here you can see this is that Mustang route from Lamar. This is an alternative that goes by the airport. So this orange line is the Lamar Pueblo Mustang. And then this orange line is the alignment of one of the Front Range Rail options. There's Pueblo, Colorado Springs. There's a suburb called Castle Rock, the Denver Airport. Let me zoom in here because this gets a little busy. So it misses Boulder. which for some of the other scenarios was one of the drivers of the ridership. This area is called Longmont. It's also in Boulder County, but it's a little more affordable place to live. And so there's a desire to have a station either in their downtown or at I-25, and you can see the effects of access on the ridership forecast. That there's a bunch of choice models, so kind of logic-based, no choice models that trade off access time and vehicle time, cost, comfort levels to some extent, probably more expressed as a discount or a perception of the different time components of paths using rail versus highway paths. Again,
Can you run a
based
model
on
now?
the trade-offs of cost incentives. Sorry?
Can you run a model now and show it calculate and generate something?
So the whole statewide model could take maybe 5 to 8 hours.
Oh,
I'm wondering, maybe what might be more interesting is we could do some sample paths. So let me try something where it should be able to find a path. Let me see from here to there. Okay. So in this case, this is a trip within Boulder. And I'm not sure why it wasn't finding a path. There may be some limits on travel times, and if there are too many transfers, maybe it wasn't carrying that. So this will report, say for instance, a fare. This is kind of a local bus fare level that it gets averaged of the people who qualify for concessionary fares, whether it's students, youth, elders, people with disabilities, will get a historical rate of people who use bulk, sort of unlimited monthly travel passes. Initial wait time of 7.5 minutes, so that's suggesting this bus route comes every 15 minutes. That the wait time is generally assumed to be half of the frequency. Walk time is calculated from the distance, access and egress. This will even give directions in a somewhat a bit more kind of technical and wonky.
how long is
I'll tell you. Sorry?
How long is that journey?
Total time is 25 minutes.
How many miles is it?
So we have, we have a measuring tool. We can even kind of look roughly along the path that is selected. So 1.76 miles, we can, okay, there's kilometers, 2.83 kilometers.
From point 1 to point 2.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And you're spending, so of that 25-minute travel, you're spending, well, it was 7.5 minutes, almost 10, just waiting for the bus. Our transit isn't nearly as frequent as some of the places in Europe. And I remember there was, well, here, let me go back and measure. So the access distance was about, okay, about a quarter mile, so that's about 5 minutes. And then egress, that's about 3 minutes, 8. So it's about 15 minutes walking and waiting for the bus, and then 10 minutes actually on board. And so this Transcat platform, and then there are others like it. cube, M, the zoom, I'll do the kind of calculations for zone-to-zone pairs. Those are usually shown with centroids. So here I'll make a selection set. Centroids. So these are the zone centroids. We'll turn off the transit. And we can add the polygon layer. So there's the polygons for which these green squares are the centroids, and then the connector links. Let's see if we can show what a and so one of the results. So we were doing walk axis. You wind up with a matrix format like this. Let's get some. Let's put some labels on these so we can. It's hard to see. Change that. Okay, it won't look pretty. Bring the routes back. So it's visible. So let's say within this map, say we're going from zone 78 to zone 396. Find 78 to 396. Okay, thankfully there are values in the cell, meaning the path is possible. So fare in dollars, that's consistent with a local bus. Waiting time. For this pair, there may be a combination of routes.
So Scott, is this all data that was typed in, or is this data that was developed after the model ran, and then are these
this is data that's developed by the model. So it uses the data that's in the links and in the route system to generate this with the shortest path algorithms. Thankfully, because this would be, so we have pretty much 6.5 thousand by 6.5 thousand cells.
And those cells, each one represents, what is this again? So each one of these.
Each one is a zone-to-zone OD pair.
Is a start at one of these green nodes and an end at a green node.
At one of the green nodes, yeah. All throughout the state.
And how did you choose where to put these green nodes?
That's kind of its own art. So that's there are about 42 million OD pairs in this matrix. Okay. So again, network coding. Maybe we do one of these, and let's give that a bigger background. So basically, you start by your let's zoom in this maybe this 358, and ideally you might want to look at sort of aerial or map information, the links that are in your network. So I'm going to highlight those as well. So we have a road along here, so we might make a centroid connector that kind of reflects this roadway. continuation of Kingsbridge Boulevard. But other times, Transcat has routines that will automatically generate those, and you can tell it like don't make connections to nodes that are on freeway links, motorway links.
Okay.
But other times it's not. So, but I mean, with things that are automated, you might want to do some manual reviews. It might have been nice if we could make this central, this part of Kingsbridge Boulevard. I don't believe, but there was no node there for the automated procedure to use. And in fact, the node that it did choose is the closest node to what we might have wanted to choose if we were doing it manually. The trade-off is by doing it manually for 6,500 zones, it can be rather time-consuming. And maybe I know about some of the areas in my metro area, but I don't necessarily know some of the far corners of the state. We kind of do the best that we can with the aerial mapping is a great feature that we can use with GIS. Let's see, for instance, I even have Google Earth is useful for a lot of times. We might be, if we're doing a base year model, it takes a couple of years to collect the traffic counts and do the cleaning to assemble the socioeconomic data. So you might want to use this history tool. And if you go back far enough, you can see that this is an interchange in Denver that has gone through considerable construction before it had these left on ramps that are no longer standard. And so for each year that we make a forecast, we typically have a base year to calibrate the model that is confirmed it cannot predict the present, that we know what the results should be. And then for each future year, we have to have a unique network, or there's some agencies and platforms that do what are called like a master network, in which case the links for every forecast year are in a single layer or feature class, and you do a selection query of which links are relevant for which forecast year or for which maybe scenario being evaluated. So Google Earth is another geographic tool that's helpful to refer to for parts of the state when we're not necessarily familiar.
So what kind of decisions have been made by Colorado DOT because of the work you've been doing? What kind of policy decisions have been made?
So, okay, so in addition to like the front range rail alignment types of questions, another effort that's going on, made the notes big. Okay, is planning for greenhouse gas reduction and combating global climate change. Since the output of the model is volumes on the roadway, you can calculate VMT, VKT, transit, passenger miles, passenger kilometers. You can do air quality and greenhouse gas emissions from those outputs. And so then you can look at policy questions of, and you could come up with any kind of alternatives of what if we increase fuel costs with a surcharge related to a carbon tax, or what if we have a more robust managed lane network that maybe supports a transit network, BRT in one sense, not necessarily the Curitiba type of BRT with the raised platforms or top-board fare payment, but maybe a more attractive bus system than one that chugs along the local streets. Incentives for carpooling. What are locations of carpool lots? A colleague, maybe I could move ahead, had been involved with looking at what are the implications of where do we provide electric vehicle fast charging stations, and how much of the state will we cover? And this gets onto, you were asking some questions about some of the unexpected results. The policy people initially involved with this. Okay, so this is an existing plan. Okay, here's the existing stations coming with their own expectations, and they were thinking, okay, an electronic vehicle may get about 125 miles range, so about 200 kilometers. And people would want to be able to make a round trip to their charging station, and then also have like a buffer and be able to do some local travel, whether commuting to work or goods. And so initially they set buffer, and I think when a 50-mile straight line circular buffer was used, it covered a lot of the states, certainly in terms of the populated areas or where the population lives. And so that was kind of a surprise to them, and they realized, okay, we need to one, we need to be more realistic, because with mountains, straight line travel isn't terribly meaningful. And then also we want to be able to show a benefit of additional charging stations. So we might want to be a little more generous with the amount of distance that we allow the EV drivers to do their errands and their commuting. So here was So here was a reduction of the existing ones with a 30-mile buffer, but using all network links. Existing in plan, 30-mile. Here's back with the 50-mile. My colleague presented this to our transportation commissions, but basically the policy making body. And there was a representative from this community. So the north-south is State Highway 125, east-west is Highway 14. It's called Walden. It's the only incorporated community in Jackson County. And they were saying, well, it looks like this would be 50 miles, but only if we go by this little road, this road here, and not by the State Highway 14 and then US 40 to Steamboat Springs. So I'll go back to the map. Okay, so this was my starred area. And you can look at some of these, the photospheres, and you'll see that the roadway, in fact, isn't even paved for all the distance. Here's that one. So for a bright and sunny summer day, that might be feasible, but this is not something that you'd want to do in the middle of a blizzard.
No.
You can see a lot of switchbacks for difficult topography. And so then by limiting to just the state highway network, now Walden is beyond that 50-mile threshold.
Okay.
Even with the plan. So I think 30. Yeah, so Steamboat would be one of the locations proposed to have a new fast charging station. And so that's one type of an analysis that you can do.
Okay. Yeah.
There are some difficulties to minimize. So my colleagues in the information management branch also maintain this website, our online transportation information system, or OTIS. And you can look up various highways. I'm going to go back. So that route from there's Steamboat Springs, you have an application. At Muddy Pass, there's mile posting for linear referencing. And then from there, you can also get tabular detail from the from the linear referencing system, mile post base. So it has locations of structures. There are other parts of these. You can get speed limits, geometry such as lane width, number of lanes, whether it's divided or not, presence or absence of shoulders. And then there's also two sets of traffic statistics. So for that reporting, since we have to generate vehicle travel for our federal reporting, that requires having volumes for the segments that are tied to the count data. As you see, with the two count locations, the route is divided up into two segments with kind of an average along the segment as well as average through the year. There's information on the percentage of trucks if you're going to do freight planning or do some consideration of passenger car equivalents, how they affect the traffic flow. And maybe let me show you another phenomenon that makes things interesting. So, as I said, governments are always having to deal with having limited budgets. And one of the things that happens here in Colorado, we call it devolution. I've heard the Ontario Ministry of Transport calls it downloading. But what happens is, so this is a town called Rifle. This is between Glenwood Springs and Grand Junction. The historic Highway 13 came along this brown line, Railroad Avenue, and along here, and then there's historic Highway 6 and 24 were here, and then I-70 was built later, as was this bypass to the west of Rifle. You get situations where the town of Rifle says, Highway 6 through our town is really important for us to keep it maintained, but it doesn't seem to be as high on CDOT statewide priorities. So we would like to maintain it locally. And in that case, the roadway may wind up no longer being designated a state highway. So if you want to do paths on a state highway system, you sometimes maybe may have to make assumptions of, well, there used to be these connections and they do make logical sense, that locals certainly are worth consulting, but if they're saying, okay, what route can the trucks use through your town to connect these different highways? These might in fact be the ones that they identify. So that's a complication that we have to deal with.
All right, Scott. Well, thank you so much. What do you think the future is going to be? What kind of future things do you think geographic information systems will play a role in transport planning in Colorado?
Yeah. So for some of the things that at least would be helpful for transportation planning, I think better handling of like the temporal data, like I was showing you. So for Google, the history feature works great for the raster earlier configuration. But if I click on this, that's hard to see. It still shows the current configuration with I-25, the lanes together rather than separate. So some kind of temporal dimension to GIS, I think, would be a great functionality, and the ability to query find me the State Highway 2 alignment in 2005. And the parts of it that hadn't been downloaded to the locals by in 2012 or what have you. I think also maybe some functionality. So here with Otis, we show the center lines, but to have features such as ramps, frontage roads, some kind of data association, or maybe even a wide median, but that doesn't merit. For instance, I think once I get to Grand Junction, okay, so here we go. Here's Colorado has a lot of one-way couplets. So Route 70B, we use a primary mile posting system. Usually it's 0 in the west and the south. That's my viewpoint, south. And the primary direction is increasing milepost. And so since the westbound is on a separate street to block over, it's given this 70Z designation. But there are other instances where it's just a wide median and there's not that type of designation. Yeah. Okay, so for instance here, this is kind of interesting that the westbound lanes are on the other side of the river from the eastbound. And this is showing no data entity for these westbound lanes that might have a different distance, different locations where they cross the rivers, the bridges. So, the ability to query that, okay, this is the I-70 primary direction, but here's its related secondary direction, to do that relatively easily rather than with a lot of manual, maybe measuring on the map or what have you.
All right.
Maybe other types of feature classes that let you, like for instance, the way we were trying to look at the transit path, if maybe there's a more elegant way to do that, or that when it shows multi-pathing, that I could take either of these, maybe 2 or 3 buses, and I'll just take whichever one shows up first.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you so much. We've been online here for some time now, and I appreciate you taking the time.
I hope it's informative. And
what's that?
I hope it's informative and gives your students an idea of um, uh, what type of applications where you might put some GIS knowledge into practice.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. It'll be nice to see how these tools are being used in a little more Wild West environment.
Sure. Yeah.
But I really appreciate that, and thank you so much. I'm going
Okay.
to say goodbye now, and appreciate
Okay.
you, Scott Ramming uh, uh, from the Department of the Colorado Department of Transportation, and I really
Exactly.
appreciate your spending the time with us. Thank you so much. Now I'm going to sign out
Okay.
here. Thanks, Scott.
Okay.